She waited outside in the rain until the CEO recognized her eyes. The rain poured relentlessly, turning the city sidewalk into a glistening river of reflections, neon lights, taxi headlights, and hurried umbrellas. People rushed by without noticing her. A young woman in a soaked grey hoodie standing still outside the towering glass building of Armitage Enterprises. Her sneakers were caked in mud, her jeans damp to the knees, and her hands trembled, not from the cold but from something deeper, older. Her name was Lila. She had been standing there for nearly an hour, unmoving, eyes fixed on the 52nd floor. She didn't belong here, everyone knew it. The receptionist inside had shooed her away twice, security had warned her once, but she stayed. Not to beg, not to protest, just to wait. Because today was the day. Inside, Alexander Armitage, CEO and heir to one of the largest luxury conglomerates in the country, was wrapping up a board meeting. Tall, impeccably dressed, and feared for his ruthless precision, Alexander was the kind of man people didn't dare question. His eyes, steel grey and unyielding, scanned through sales reports and charts without blinking. "Mr. Armitage," his assistant whispered at his side, leaning closer. "There's a girl outside. Won't leave. Been there for a while." He didn't look up. "Call security. She says she knows you." That made him pause. His pen stilled on the paper. Slowly, he looked toward the window. From this high up, he could barely make out the crowd on the sidewalk below, blurred by the storm. But something pricked at the back of his mind. A chill, not from the weather but from memory. He stood. Descending the elevator, Alexander's heart was calm, face unreadable. But inside, something twisted. Something old. Something he had buried. As the doors opened to the lobby, he walked toward the glass entrance. And that's when he saw her. Through the rain, through the fogged-up panes, those eyes, everything stopped. The noise of the city dulled. Time slowed. And all he could see were her eyes, wide, waiting, desperate. They were hers. The same shape. The same light brown flecked with green. The same eyes he saw every time he looked in the mirror, until she died. The girl outside looked up and met his gaze through the glass. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just whispered a name, and though he couldn't hear her voice through the window, he read her lips. "Dad." Alexander didn't move. His breath caught in his throat as the word echoed inside him like thunder. Dad. No one had called him that in over 20 years, not since. His eyes scanned her again, searching for some kind of trick. She was barely more than a teenager, maybe 20, maybe less. Wet hair clung to her cheeks, and her shoulders trembled from the cold, but her eyes, those damn eyes, they rooted him in place. The automatic doors slid open with a hiss, and the rush of wind and rain filled the lobby. She stepped forward. Security hesitated, looking at him for instructions. He raised one hand slightly. "Let her in." Lila crossed the threshold as if entering another world. She blinked against the brightness of the marble floors and polished chrome, her shoes squeaking with every step. Water pooled beneath her feet, but she didn't notice. All she saw was him. "You're Alexander Armitage?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "Yes," he said, trying to control the tightness in his throat. "And you are?" "I'm Lila Monroe. My mother was Claire Monroe." The name hit him like a punch. Claire. The lobby disappeared. For a split second, he was 24 again, standing barefoot in Claire's tiny apartment, holding her while she cried about the job she lost. They had been everything to each other for 3 brief, impossible months, until she vanished. "You knew her?" he asked, voice strained. "She died 2 months ago," Lila replied. "Cancer. She told me everything before she passed. About you. About how you never knew I existed." The room seemed to tilt. Alexander gripped the nearest counter for support. "I didn't know," he whispered. "I believe you," she said quickly, stepping closer. "She was scared, that's all. She said your world would never have accepted her, or me." He stared at her. Why come now? She made me promise that I'd find you, that I'd look into your eyes. She said I'd know you by them, and I did. The silence stretched. The CEO, who commanded boardrooms and crushed negotiations, was now just a man, staring at the past, dripping wet and trembling. "I'm sorry," he said at last. "I didn't come for an apology," she replied softly. "I came for the truth." Alexander turned slightly. "Come upstairs." She hesitated. "You sure?" "I want answers too," he said. "And if you're really my daughter, then you deserve everything I can give." As they walked toward the elevator side by side, his assistant watched from a distance, confusion and suspicion clouding her eyes. Because she knew something Alexander didn't. Claire Monroe hadn't died in peace. She'd died whispering secrets, and one of them could destroy everything. The elevator ride to the 52nd floor was silent, save for the soft hum of machinery. Lila stood to Alexander's left, arms crossed over her damp hoodie, eyes fixed ahead. He tried to look at her, but every glance brought a new wave of unease. There was no denying it. She looked like him. The same high cheekbones, the same quiet, watchful intensity. But it was more than just appearance. It was presence. The doors opened to a sleek private office, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. Everything inside was minimalist, calculated, cold. "This way," Alexander said, leading her to a seating area near the windows. He handed her a towel from a drawer, unused like most things in his life. She took it with a nod and began drying her hair and arms. The silence between them was thick with questions. "I didn't know your mother kept you hidden," he said finally, pouring 2 glasses of water. "She did it to protect me. That's what she always said." Lila stared into the glass he handed her, as if it might hold answers. "She lived in 3 different states before we settled in Florida, changed jobs constantly, no friends, no pictures of you." Alexander sat across from her, hands clasped. "She cut all ties." "She said she was scared of you," Lila admitted. His jaw tensed. "Scared of me? She said you came from a world that punished weakness, that your family would have erased us." He let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "That sounds like my father, but I never would have let that happen. Claire should have told me. She wanted to. She wrote you letters, but she never sent them." He blinked. "Letters?" Lila reached into her bag and pulled out a faded envelope. It was creased and yellowed, with his name written in Claire's handwriting. "This is the only one I found. She wrote it when I was a baby." Alexander opened it slowly. Inside, the letter was short, raw, and full of emotion. Claire had told him she loved him, that she was pregnant, that she didn't expect anything from him, but she wanted him to know. As he read, his fingers trembled. When he finished, he looked up at Lila. "I would have come. I would have fought for you." "I know that now," she whispered. Silence wrapped around them again, broken only by the sound of distant thunder outside. Lila looked down, then met his eyes. "I'm not asking for money or a house or anything like that. I need to know who I am." Alexander nodded slowly. "Then we'll start there." But as the storm raged outside, neither of them noticed the blinking red light on his office phone, recording everything. And far below, someone was already listening. Lila stood near the glass, watching rain slide down the window in winding trails. The city below blurred into motion and mist. She felt small in this world, too clean, too sharp, like if she breathed too loudly, it would all shatter. Alexander watched her carefully. "When's your birthday?" "May 14th, she said, not turning around. "You weren't there." His heart clenched. "No, I wasn't, but I wish I had been." She turned then, slowly. "Do you have other kids?" He shook his head. "No wife." "No family. My parents died years ago. I buried myself in this company. This building became my world." "And now I'm part of it?" she asked, the corner of her mouth twitching upward. A soaked girl with no degree, no connections? "You're my daughter," he said firmly. "That's all that matters." She laughed softly, almost disbelieving. "It's strange. My whole life I imagined what you'd be like. I thought maybe you were a musician or a teacher, not a billionaire." He allowed a small smile. "I thought maybe I had a daughter out there, but I told myself it was just guilt, that I was imagining it." Lila nodded, then glanced at the desk where the old letter lay open. "I found that 2 days after the funeral. It was inside one of her journals." "Are there more?" he asked. "I don't know. I left most of her things in a storage unit. I couldn't go through all of it yet. It's too much." "I can help with that," he offered. "We'll go through everything together." She nodded hesitantly. "Okay." A knock on the door interrupted them. His assistant, Mallory, stepped in carefully, her expression neutral. "Sorry, Mr. Armitage. There's a call from the board you might want to take privately." "I'll call them back," he said without looking at her. Mallory hesitated. Her eyes flicked to Lila, then back to him. "Understood." As the door closed, Lila raised an eyebrow. "She doesn't like me." "She doesn't like surprises," he replied. "Neither do I, usually." "Well, I'm the biggest surprise of your life," she said softly. He looked at her for a long moment. "Yes, and maybe the best." Outside, the storm was beginning to fade. Light filtered through the clouds, casting soft gold across the skyline. Lila sat down beside him again. "Can I ask you something weird?" "Of course." "If you had known about me back then, what would you have done?" Alexander didn't answer right away. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I would have married your mother," he said. "I would have raised you, protected you, given you everything I never had." Lila blinked quickly, then nodded. Her hands twisted the towel in her lap. "But I can't change the past," he added. "Only what happens now." What neither of them knew was that downstairs a message had been delivered anonymously. A file, a photograph, a document that proved one devastating fact. Claire Monroe hadn't been running from Alexander. She'd been running from someone else in his family. Night had fallen by the time Lila left the building. Alexander had offered her a car, even a hotel room, but she refused. "I'm not ready to step into that life yet," she'd said. So he gave her his number, his private one, and told her, with more emotion than he usually allowed, "Call me, anytime." She promised she would. Now she stood on the rainy sidewalk again, her hoodie still damp, but her heart strangely lighter. She had done it. She had found him. And more than that, he hadn't turned away. Across the street, a black sedan idled, its headlights off. The driver watched as Lila disappeared into the crowd, blending in with the rhythm of the city. A phone buzzed softly in his lap. "She made contact," he said into the speaker. A voice replied, curt and cold. "And the father?" "Unaware, completely taken in." There was a pause, then, "We proceed, no mistakes." The line went dead. Back inside the building, Alexander sat at his desk long after the office had emptied. The letter still lay beside him. He picked it up again, reading it for the 5th, maybe 6th time. Claire's handwriting, strong, rushed, emotional, still made his chest ache. He was a father. The word didn't feel real yet. But Lila had looked him in the eye and called him that, and it had shaken something loose inside him that he didn't know was there anymore. Mallory returned with a folder, her face composed. "This came from the archives. You requested a background file on Claire Monroe?" He nodded. "I want to know where she's been, what she went through. If I missed signs, I need to know." She hesitated before handing it over. "There's something you should see." Alexander opened the folder and flipped through the documents. School transcripts, job applications, apartment leases. Then his eyes stopped. A photo. Old. Faded. A young Claire holding a baby. But that wasn't what made his blood run cold. It was the man standing behind her in the background. A man Alexander knew well. Too well. His brother. David. His dead brother. The room swam for a moment. "Is this real?" he asked, voice barely audible. Mallory nodded. We verified the date. This was taken nearly 20 years ago, a year after David supposedly died in that accident. Alexander stared at the image, mind reeling. David had been wild, cruel even. Their father had paid to cover his mistakes more than once, but he died in a boating crash. At least that was the story they were told. There had been no body, only a closed casket. "What the hell is going on?" Alexander whispered. Mallory's voice was soft. "I think Claire was running from him, not you." And in that instant everything shifted, because if David had been alive all this time, then Lila might not just be his daughter, she might also be the reason David disappeared. The next morning dawned cold and clear, the storm having washed the city in silver and silence. Lila sat on a creaky bench at a bus stop in the Lower East Side, her hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee that had long gone cold. Her mind replayed every moment from the night before. His eyes, the letter, the way he said, "You're my daughter," like it meant something. But beneath the warmth was a flicker of unease. A man in a black coat had followed her for 3 blocks after she left the building. She had ducked into a corner store to lose him, but now she felt watched, constantly. Claire had taught her to be cautious, never trust too easily, never assume safety just because someone shares your blood. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Lila?" Alexander's voice soft and low. "It's me." Relief softened her shoulders. "Hi." "I couldn't sleep. I've been reading and rereading that letter." "Me too," she admitted. "I keep wondering what her life could have been if she'd stayed. I wonder what my life could have been if she had," he said. There was a pause. "I need to tell you something," he continued. Something strange came up. A photo. She sat straighter. "Of what?" "Claire. With a man I thought was dead, my brother David." The name chilled her. Alexander's voice dropped. "You knew him?" She swallowed. "I never met him. But Mom, she had nightmares. Sometimes she'd whisper in her sleep. The name David came up more than once. I thought it was just a ghost from her past." "I need to know everything," he said. Lila looked out at the city. "Then you should come with me to the storage unit." Alexander didn't hesitate. "Send me the address." An hour later, they met outside a dusty self-storage building on the edge of Queens. The elevator creaked as they rose to the 3rd floor. Lila led the way to Unit 308 and fumbled with the keys. Inside was a life packed into boxes: books, clothes, kitchenware, old drawings, baby shoes. She pulled out a plastic crate marked Journals. "These are hers," she said, setting them on the floor between them. They sat cross-legged on the concrete, flipping through pages filled with loopy handwriting, underlined sentences, and the occasional tear stain. Then Alexander stopped cold. He was staring at a page dated September 2007. The ink was smudged, the words hurried. "He found us again. I saw him across the street. He's alive. Oh God. I have to leave. Lila isn't safe. He said he'd take her if I didn't disappear. I thought he was dead. But I was wrong. I was so wrong." Alexander looked up, his voice hoarse. "She wasn't running from me. She was running from David." And that changed everything. Lila stared at the journal page, her breath catching in her throat. The neat lines of her mother's handwriting had always felt like home, safe, gentle, certain. But this page was different. The words trembled with panic. The loops in the letters were jagged. The ink smeared like it had been written through tears. "She never told me," Lila whispered. "Not once. She talked about being scared, about moving, but she never said who, never named anyone." Alexander sat back, the journal still in his hand. "She must have been terrified." "She was," Lila replied, her voice barely audible. "And now I know why." Alexander's face darkened. "David was always the dangerous one. Our father covered up everything. Drunk driving charges, a girl who disappeared after a party, stolen money. I thought he died before he could do worse." Lila looked up. "Do you think he faked his death?" Alexander nodded slowly. "With our family's money, it's possible. especially if our father helped. Why would he go after Mom? She asked, voice tight. Because she knew something, he said. Or maybe he thought you were his. The silence that followed was thick and unbearable. Lila's eyes widened. Wait, you don't think... No, Alexander said quickly, firmly. No, you're mine. I feel it. I know it. But Lila's hands had started to shake. We need to be sure. Alexander hesitated, then reached for his phone. We'll do a paternity test. Today. She nodded, swallowing hard. They returned to the office together. His private doctor was waiting. The process was quick. A cheek swab, signatures, and reassurances. We'll have results within 24 hours, the doctor said. Afterward, Alexander led her into his personal suite behind the office. It was more like a luxury apartment than a workspace. Plush furniture, a grand piano, soft lighting. A place he had built but never used. You can stay here if you want, he said gently. She looked around, cautious. I don't know. You don't have to decide now, he added. But it's safe. She nodded, eyes distant. Mallory entered with a tray of tea. She didn't speak to Lila, only set the cups down and left silent as a ghost. She really doesn't like me, Lila muttered. Alexander gave a short laugh. She doesn't like anyone, but she's loyal. They sat in silence for a few minutes, sipping tea that neither of them tasted. Outside, the rain had finally stopped, but the air between them stayed heavy. Do you think he's still out there? Lila asked. David? Alexander looked out the window. If he is, he knows about you now. Which means he'll come back. Lila's eyes widened. Why? What does he want? I don't know, Alexander said slowly. But David never let go of anything he thought belonged to him. And somewhere across the city, a man with a scar down his jaw smiled in the dark, because he had waited 20 years for this moment. And now, the game had finally begun. That night, Lila lay on the sofa in Alexander's private suite, unable to sleep. The city hummed beyond the windows, and every sound, every horn, every distant siren felt like it was coming closer. Her mother's words echoed in her head. He said he'd take her if I didn't disappear. She reached for one of the journals again, flipping through the pages by the soft glow of a lamp. Most entries were about daily life, her first steps, a lost tooth, school struggles. But there were darker notes too. Codes, dates, a string of locations they'd lived, always moving, never more than 6 months in one place. Suddenly, something fell from the back of the journal, an old photo. It was creased and worn, a little girl with big eyes and pigtails sitting on a motel bed clutching a teddy bear. Standing just behind her, almost out of frame, was a man in shadow. Lila's stomach turned. She had never seen that man before. She grabbed her phone and snapped a photo of it. Then, after a moment's hesitation, she tiptoed out of the suite and into the hallway. The building was quiet at night, offices dark, but one light glowed behind Mallory's door. Lila knocked. "Come in," came the voice, cool as always. Mallory looked up, surprised to see her. "Can't sleep?" "No," Lila said. "I need your help." Mallory raised an eyebrow. "With what?" She held out the photo. "Do you recognize him?" Mallory took the image and studied it carefully. Her face changed, ever so slightly. "Where did you get this?" she asked. "It was in one of my mom's journals." Mallory stood and walked to a filing cabinet. "This man's name is Marcus Vane. Used to work for the Armitage family. He was a private investigator, but more like a fixer. Fired 15 years ago for undisclosed reasons." "Undisclosed?" Lila asked. Mallory pulled out a thin folder. "David's shadow. Wherever David went, Marcus followed. There were rumors, but no proof." "Rumors like what?" "That Marcus helped David disappear after the boating accident." Lila's skin prickled. "So my mom was being watched. For years, most likely." Lila leaned in, her voice a whisper. "Why would David want me?" Mallory hesitated. Because you were the one thing he couldn't control. If Claire had you and you were Alexander's, then David lost, completely. And David Armitage never lost. Suddenly Mallory's office phone buzzed, an internal call. She answered, listened, then looked sharply at Lila. "You should come with me." They hurried down the hall to Alexander's office. He was sitting at his desk, pale, holding a single sheet of paper. His eyes met Lila's. "The test results just came back," he said. Lila's chest tightened. "And?" Alexander handed her the paper. "You're my daughter, Lila, without a doubt." Tears sprang to her eyes. Relief, joy, fear, all at once. But before the moment could settle, Mallory's cell phone rang. She answered it and her face went white. "What is it?" Alexander asked. Mallory's voice shook. "There's been a break-in at the storage unit. Everything is gone." The drive to the storage facility was eerily quiet. Alexander gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, his jaw clenched, while Lila stared out the window, her thoughts spiraling. Her mother's entire life, every photo, every journal, every shred of evidence, had just vanished. And whoever did it knew exactly what to take. When they arrived, the place was swarming with police. Yellow tape cordoned off the hallway where Unit 308 had once been sealed. Now the lock hung twisted on the ground. The door left slightly ajar, like a mouth frozen mid-scream. The manager approached, wringing his hands. "We don't know how they bypassed the alarms. The cameras were disabled. Clean job. Real professional." Alexander nodded grimly. Someone knew what they were looking for. Inside the unit, it was chaos. Boxes smashed, papers shredded, clothes scattered. Lila knelt beside the overturned crate of journals, every single book gone. She picked up a broken locket from the floor, her mother's. The photo inside of baby Lila and Claire had been torn out. "They took the picture," she said quietly. Alexander looked around. "They're trying to erase her, erase the past." Lila stood slowly. "Not just her. Me." Back at the office later that afternoon, the tension was thick. Alexander sat across from Lila in his suite, a large binder open between them. "This is everything I have on David, his records, old contacts, financials." He flipped to a page showing a photo of David at 19, smirking, confident, eyes filled with something dark. Lila stared at it for a long time. "He scares me," she admitted. Alexander looked at her. "He scared all of us, but now that I know you're mine, I'll protect you, no matter what." Mallory stepped into the room holding a flash drive. "We found something." They gathered around as she plugged it into the large monitor. A grainy video played. Security footage from a nearby building the night of the break-in. A shadowy figure moved quickly, confidently. Then a pause. The man turned toward the camera for half a second, enough to see a scar cutting across his jaw. Lila gasped. "That's him. That's the man from the photo." Mallory nodded. "Marcus Vane." Alexander's voice dropped. "Then David's back, and he brought Marcus with him." Lila's hands trembled. "But why now, after all these years?" Mallory clicked to the next frame, an image enhanced from the video. In the man's hand was a photo of Lila, one that had been inside the journals. He was holding it up to the light like a trophy. "He's targeting her," Mallory said, "which means he's sending a message." Alexander stood, his expression hardening. "Then we send one back." He turned to Lila. "You're not running anymore, not like your mother had to. I'm putting full security on you. And if David wants to come out of the shadows," he stepped closer, voice steel, "he'll have to go through me first." But even as he spoke, in a quiet hotel on the edge of the city, a man watched a live feed of their conversation. And next to him was a second photo, one of Alexander, crossed out in red ink. The sun had just begun to set, casting long shadows across Alexander's office as he finalized the arrangements. Lila sat nearby, wrapped in a blanket, exhaustion lining her face. A discreet team of private security specialists waited in the next room, ready to be deployed. They had been briefed with one order: Protect Lila Monroe at all costs. Mallory entered quietly, holding a thin file. I pulled his last known financials, offshore accounts, ghost companies. David never really disappeared, he just changed shape. Alexander flipped through the pages. He's been planning this, watching, waiting. Lila looked up. But for what? What does he want from me? Mallory paused. Control, revenge, maybe both. Alexander stood and crossed the room, gazing out the tall windows. My father always saw David as the future of the family, even after all the messes, the lies, the rumors. He was the golden son. I was the spare, the safe one. You built an empire, Mallory said, but I was never his favorite. He looked over at Lila. And when Claire chose me, I think that broke something in David. Lila's voice was barely above a whisper. Do you think he hurt her? Alexander turned, pain flashing in his eyes. I think he made her life a prison. I think she spent 20 years looking over her shoulder, waiting for him to come back. There was a silence that hung like fog in the air. I don't want to live like that, Lila said. I don't want to be afraid. You won't, Alexander replied. Not anymore. A knock broke the tension. One of the security team stepped in. Sir, you might want to see this. He handed Alexander a small sealed envelope, no return address. Inside was a single item, a photo of Lila standing outside Armitage Enterprises in the rain. Written across the bottom, in red ink, "She has your eyes." I always hated that. Alexander's hands trembled, then crumpled the photo in his fist. It's him, Mallory said. He's watching. Lila stepped back, pale. How did he get that close? The guard looked grim. We're reviewing all footage, but this was hand-delivered. To the front desk, someone walked right in. Alexander's voice turned cold. Then he's not hiding anymore. He turned to Mallory. Set up the safe house, tonight. I want Lila moved immediately. Mallory nodded and disappeared into action. Alexander knelt beside Lila. You're not alone in this. I won't let him hurt you. Lila met his eyes, tears welling. You're the only thing I've got left. He reached out and gently touched her cheek. Then I'll be enough. But far across town, in a candle-lit room lined with newspaper clippings and photographs, David Armitage smiled as he added one more photo to his twisted wall. A family portrait. Claire, Alexander, and a baby girl. He lit a match and held it to the edge of the photo. Time to finish what I started, he whispered, as the image burned to ash. The safe house was nothing like Lila expected. Nestled in the quiet hills just beyond the city limits, it looked more like a secluded art studio than a fortress. High walls, reinforced doors, surveillance cameras tucked discreetly into corners. It had the warmth of a retreat and the bones of a bunker. Alexander had spared no expense. As the armored SUV pulled up the driveway, Lila pressed her forehead to the window. The world outside felt like a dream she had walked away from. In just days, her entire life had unraveled, then reassembled into something unrecognizable. She had a father now, and an enemy. Security personnel swept the perimeter while Mallory stepped out ahead, speaking into her earpiece with sharp precision. Alexander exited next, his presence calm but alert. Then Lila followed, clutching a small duffel bag that now held her mother's last surviving belongings. Let's get you inside, Alexander said gently. The interior was quiet and clean, sunlight spilling across hardwood floors, shelves lined with books, a small fireplace in the corner. It smelled of cedar and something faintly floral, not sterile, but safe. Lila collapsed onto the couch as Mallory checked the window locks. This place is off-grid, she explained. No signals in or out without approval. Satellite backup for comms. Panic room in the cellar if needed. Alexander raised an eyebrow. You've improved it since I was here last. Mallory didn't look up. Times have changed. Lila looked around. You've used this before? Once, Alexander admitted. Years ago during a business threat. Never thought I'd use it like this. Mallory handed Lila a phone. This one works only within our secure network. You'll have direct lines to me, Alexander, and the guard team. Lila nodded slowly, then glanced at Alexander. Do you really think he'll come here? He met her eyes. I think David is watching to see what we do next. He'll test our defenses, look for weakness. He already knows mine, Lila said softly. Alexander knelt in front of her. He doesn't know who you've become. Mallory's phone buzzed. She answered, then motioned to Alexander. Trouble? He asked. A visitor, downtown. Someone claiming to have known Claire. Says he has a message for Lila, but he won't speak to anyone else. Alexander stiffened. Who is he? Name's Gavin. Claims he met Claire years ago when she was living under an alias. Says he's been waiting for this moment. Lila sat up. Should I go? No, Alexander said quickly. It could be a trap. Mallory nodded. We'll bring him in, carefully. Later that evening, Gavin arrived under heavy surveillance. He was lean, nervous, with darting eyes and calloused hands. Lila studied him from behind a one-way mirror. Then she whispered, I know him. Alexander turned sharply. From where? Her voice shook. I remember him from Florida. He lived in our building. He used to help Mom carry groceries. On the screen, Gavin looked straight at the mirror, his voice low but clear. I know you're watching, Lila, and I know what your mother died to protect. The interrogation room inside the safe house was simple. No windows, only a table, 2 chairs, and a single hanging light. Gavin sat calmly, hands folded, eyes fixed on the door as if he expected ghosts to enter instead of people. Lila hesitated outside with Alexander and Mallory, her heartbeat thudding in her ears. I should talk to him, she said. Alexander frowned. Not alone. I'll go with her, Mallory offered. He won't try anything with both of us there. They entered the room together. Gavin looked up, his face softening at the sight of Lila. You've grown, he said. You look just like her. Lila sat, hands clenched in her lap. You knew my mom? For a little while. She lived in my complex back in Tampa. She was calling herself Annabelle then. She kept to herself, but we spoke sometimes late at night, after she thought everyone else was asleep. Mallory leaned forward. Why are you here now? Gavin looked between them, then slowly reached into his jacket and pulled out a small metal key. She gave me this the night before she left, told me if anything ever happened to her, I should find her daughter and give it to her. Said there was something the world couldn't see, something hidden. Lila took the key with trembling fingers. What does it open? Gavin shook his head. She didn't say, just that it was in the locker at Union Street Station. Storage locker 31, but I've never been able to access it. I tried once and someone followed me. I got scared. Mallory frowned. You think David was watching you? I know he was, Gavin said darkly. I saw him, Lila. Not long after your mum left Florida. He was sitting in a car across the street from my place, watching, waiting. Lila felt her stomach churn. She told me we left because of a job offer. She was trying to protect you, Gavin replied. Always, Mallory stood. We'll secure the station and get the contents of that locker. You've done your part. Gavin looked at Lila. One more thing. She didn't just run because she was scared. She ran because she found something. A document. A signature. I don't know what it was, but she said it was the reason David had to disappear. Alexander entered the room at that moment, his expression grim. What kind of document? Gavin shook his head. She didn't say. Only that it proved everything. That night, Mallory's team moved swiftly. By morning, the contents of Locker 31 were delivered to the safe house. Inside a rusted metal box were a handful of envelopes, a black notebook with no name, and a small flash drive. Mallory loaded the drive onto a secure laptop. One file, encrypted. It took hours to decode. When the screen finally blinked to life, they stared in stunned silence. Financial records, names, accounts, and at the center of it all, David Armitage, and Claire Monroe's forged signature on documents transferring millions. Alexander whispered, he used her, laundered money through her name, and when she found out... Lila finished the sentence in a whisper. He tried to erase her. The revelations from the flash drive changed everything. For hours, Alexander and Mallory pored over the documents, each detail more damning than the last. Offshore accounts under Claire's name, funds traced back to shell companies linked to Armitage family assets, transactions made just days before David's supposed death. It was a web of deceit, and Claire had been caught in the center. Lila sat curled in a chair nearby, watching their expressions shift from anger to disbelief to something darker, regret. He used her as a front, Alexander muttered. Every move calculated. He knew she was vulnerable, knew no one would look twice at a young single mother. She must have found the truth, Mallory added. And when she confronted him, he panicked. Alexander's eyes narrowed. He didn't just disappear to escape justice. He disappeared to bury the evidence, and Claire. Lila stood slowly. She didn't tell me. Not any of it. Not the documents. Not the money. She just kept running. Because she knew what David was capable of, Alexander said. She knew he wouldn't stop until she was gone. Mallory leaned over the laptop again. There's more, a note, hidden deep in the metadata. She clicked a line of code, and a message appeared in plain text. If you're reading this, it means I've failed to outrun him. But my daughter deserves the truth, the real truth, about what happened in that house, about what David did to me. Tell her I'm sorry. I never meant for her to carry this. Lila covered her mouth, tears welling. She was trying to leave me a map, a way out. Alexander crossed the room and knelt beside her. She gave you everything she could, even while hiding in the dark. Mallory's phone buzzed suddenly. An alert. She frowned. There's movement outside the perimeter, West Ridge. Alexander stiffened. How many? Just one. Camera caught him for a split second before he ducked out of sight. Lila's blood ran cold. It's him. Alexander stood and signaled the security team. Lock the compound, no one in or out. Lila moved to the window, heart racing. She could feel it, the pressure in the air, the crawling tension down her spine. Her mother's warnings no longer sounded paranoid. They were prophecy. Suddenly the power flickered. Once, twice, then went out. Emergency lights blinked on. The hum of generators kicked in. Mallory spoke into her comms. All units, report. A crackle of static, then a voice. He's inside. Alarms blared. Doors slammed shut. Alexander grabbed Lila's hand. Panic room now. They ran through the hall as security rushed in the opposite direction. Mallory entered a code into a hidden panel, and a steel door slid open, revealing a secure room lined with monitors and emergency supplies. Stay here, she ordered. I'll find him. But just as the door began to close, a voice rang out from the shadows of the hallway. Leaving so soon, brother? And there he was, David Armitage, alive, smiling, and holding a gun. The hallway froze in time. David's presence sent a shockwave through the air, an unnatural calm that felt more dangerous than rage. He stepped forward slowly, like a man returning home from a long vacation, not like a fugitive emerging from the shadows. Alexander positioned himself in front of Lila, eyes locked with his brother's. You should have stayed dead, he said coldly. David chuckled, gun still steady in his hand. Funny, I was going to say the same to you. Lila tried to see past Alexander's shoulder. David didn't look like the photographs anymore. Time had twisted him. Hollow cheeks, a jagged scar along his jaw, but the eyes were the same. Cold, calculating, empty. Mallory stood just a few feet away, her hand hovering near her concealed weapon. Drop it, David, she warned. He tilted his head. You must be the loyal assistant. Always thought Alexander liked his toys quiet and obedient. I'm not quiet. And I'm definitely not yours to mock, she snapped. David's grin widened. Ah, fiery, I like that. He took one more step forward, and that's when Lila saw it. His other hand, hidden behind his back, holding something small. A remote. Alexander saw it too. What's that? David raised it slowly. Insurance. This little beauty is connected to a failsafe in your precious safe house. Explosives in the generator room. Don't worry. It's not enough to kill anyone, unless I decide otherwise. You'd blow yourself up? Alexander asked. David shrugged. Wouldn't be the worst way I've ended a party. Mallory's voice was icy. You won't get out of here. I don't plan to, he said. Everyone went still. David's smile faded. I came for her. His eyes moved to Lila. She's mine. Alexander stepped forward, fury boiling beneath his skin. She's not. She never was. David's jaw clenched. Claire was mine. She said she loved me. Before you. Before everything. You used her, Lila cried suddenly. You laundered money through her name. You threatened her. David's eyes snapped to hers. She betrayed me. You lied to her, Lila said, voice trembling but steady. You made her run for 20 years. David's hand trembled slightly on the gun. She was pregnant, he said, almost to himself. And I thought maybe the baby was mine. Alexander's voice cracked through the tension. She wasn't. And now we all know it. David's eyes glistened, not with sorrow but with something more fractured, something broken. I lost everything because of her, he whispered. Because of you. Mallory took one step closer. You don't have to do this. But David's grip tightened on the remote. His breathing grew ragged. I didn't come to kill anyone, he said. I came to be seen, to remind you that you don't get to bury people like me. Then he tossed the remote to the ground and raised his hands. I surrender. Silence. The tension shattered as security stormed in, weapons drawn. David made no move to resist. He just smiled as he was cuffed, but as they led him away, he turned one last time to Lila. You think this is over? He leaned close, eyes gleaming. There's still one secret left, and it's about your mother. They kept David in the fortified holding room at the back of the safe house. Steel walls, triple locks, no windows. Alexander insisted on maximum security, but David didn't fight. He just sat quietly on the metal bench, smiling to himself like a man who had played his move and was now simply waiting for the pieces to fall. Lila watched from the monitor room, arms crossed over her chest, stomach churning. What did he mean? She asked. What secret about my mother? Alexander didn't answer right away. He was pacing, rubbing the back of his neck, deep in thought. Mallory reviewed the files again. We've uncovered everything. Money laundering, offshore accounts, Claire's forged signature. There can't be more. There always is with David, Alexander said. He plants rot where you least expect it. Lila turned to him. I want to talk to him. No, Alexander said instantly. It's a trap. He'll twist your mind. I need to know what he's holding, she insisted. If there's more, if there's something about her, I need it. Alexander hesitated, torn between fear and respect for the fire he saw in her eyes. She wasn't just a scared girl anymore. She was becoming something stronger, someone ready. He nodded once. You won't be alone. Mallory will monitor the whole thing. An hour later, Lila stepped into the holding room. The air inside was still, almost stale. David looked up from where he sat, cuffed but calm. Well, he said, the princess returns. She sat across from him, her face unreadable. Tell me what you know. David leaned forward, his voice soft. You remind me of her, Claire. Not the scared version, the one I met first. She was fire, untamed, and she saw through me, even then. Good, Lila said. He smiled. I don't expect forgiveness, but I do want clarity. For both of us. Lila didn't speak. David's eyes narrowed. Claire didn't just run because of what she found. She ran because she was carrying two secrets. Lila's brows furrowed. What do you mean? David tilted his head. The money was one, but the other was about who she was, who she used to be. He reached into his coat slowly, under supervision, and pulled out a folded piece of paper the guards had missed. He slid it across the table. Lila opened it with trembling fingers. A faded newspaper article, dated 22 years ago. A missing woman, Claire Monroe, listed under a different name. And next to her photo, a headline, "Heiress to political scandal vanishes after alleged witness testimony in corruption case." Lila stared at it, the room spinning. She was part of a federal investigation? David nodded. She testified against a senator, a man who had connections with our father. She wasn't just running from me, Lila. She was running from something far bigger. Lila's voice cracked. You knew. I found out years later. That's when I knew she could destroy everything. Mallory's voice buzzed through the intercom. Lila, step away now. But Lila didn't move. She was staring at David, fury rising. You tried to erase her, she whispered, because she was brave, and you were afraid. David looked at her with something close to admiration, and then he said calmly, she didn't die of cancer. She was poisoned. The silence after David's words was total. Lila stared at him, her body frozen, her mind spinning. Her mother, poisoned? No, it couldn't be true. Claire had been sick, yes, but Lila had been there for the whole thing. The doctors, the slow decline, the pain, the morphine. It was cancer, she said, more to herself than to him. I was there. I saw it. David leaned back, still cuffed, calm as ice. Yes, that's what they told you. The door burst open. Mallory rushed in, grabbing Lila's arm. Out, now. Lila didn't resist, but she didn't take her eyes off David either. If you're lying, he smiled faintly, then it shouldn't be so easy to prove me wrong. Back in the security room, Alexander was on the phone with someone from the Federal Archives, demanding a background on Claire's alleged testimony. His face was pale but sharp, all focus. Mallory turned to Lila. We need to exhume your mother's body. Lila blinked. What? We'll need a tox screen. If David's telling the truth, traces of poison might still be detectable. Alexander hung up the phone. And if he's lying? Mallory looked grim. Then we prove it and bury him in court. By the next morning, the paperwork was expedited. Being Alexander Armitage came with certain privileges, legal doors that opened with a name, favors called in. Lila rode in silence to the cemetery, numb, wrapped in a coat far too warm for the air. They stood at the edge of the graveyard as a small team of specialists worked. It was raining again, just as it had when she first met Alexander. As the casket was raised and opened, Lila turned away. Alexander stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder. Neither of them spoke. The tests took hours. Back at the safe house, Lila paced the hallway restlessly. Every tick of the clock felt like a thunderclap. Her memories of her mother had already been rewritten so many times in the past few days. Could she bear one more shift, one more crack in the foundation? Mallory returned late that night with the results. Traces of ricin, she said quietly. Small amounts, administered over time. Slipped into her medications, enough to mimic the symptoms of late-stage cancer. Lila sat down hard, her legs suddenly useless. Alexander stared blankly. So he did it. Mallory shook her head. We don't know that he did, but someone wanted her gone, and they wanted it to look natural. Lila pressed her hands to her face. She thought she was dying. She was in pain. And all along, someone was killing her. Someone with access, Mallory said. Someone who knew her condition and her medications. Alexander looked at Mallory. We need to find out who was treating her, who had access to her prescriptions in those final weeks. Mallory nodded and stepped out to make the calls. Lila sat in silence, her heart hollowing. Claire had been silenced, slowly, carefully, by someone who wanted the truth to stay buried with her. But now Lila knew, and she wouldn't stop until every secret was exposed. Mallory returned with a stack of printed records in hand, her expression dark and tight. I pulled her last medical providers. There were 2 clinics, one in Florida, one in Georgia. The Georgia clinic oversaw her pain management in the final weeks. One doctor in particular signed off on nearly every prescription. Alexander took the file and scanned the page. Dr. Eric Hall. Lila's eyes narrowed. I remember that name. He was nice, quiet, always seemed nervous around my mum. Mallory nodded. Because he wasn't a real doctor. Both Alexander and Lila looked up sharply. Mallory placed a new sheet on the table. I cross-checked his license. It was revoked 12 years ago in California. Fraud charges. He vanished after that. Reappeared in Georgia under a fake identity. He was planted, Alexander said. Most likely, Mallory agreed, by someone who wanted to make sure Claire died quietly, and with no questions. Lila stood. Where is he now? Mallory hesitated. We're tracking him. He vanished again right after Claire's death, but we'll find him. Alexander paced, fists clenched. This has David's fingerprints all over it, but even he wouldn't have known how to embed someone in a medical practice unless he had help, Mallory finished. Someone with resources, someone with reach. Lila turned to Alexander slowly. You said your father protected David, paid to cover things up. Maybe he was still protecting him even after death. Alexander nodded grimly. He left a trust, quiet, untraceable. It was supposed to be closed after David's death, but what if it wasn't? Mallory sat at the laptop and typed rapidly. Give me a name. Thaddeus Armitage, Alexander said. Check foundations, shell charities. Within moments, a result appeared. A charity called the Thaddeus Initiative, registered under a holding company in the Cayman Islands. On the surface, it appeared to fund educational scholarships. But the transactions told a different story. Frequent transfers to small medical groups, consulting firms, and international travel services. Mallory leaned back. This is it. This is the money that kept David hidden. Funded the operation to kill Claire. Lila looked at the screen, rage simmering beneath her shock. And now it's going to fund his downfall. Alexander stepped forward, his voice steady. We'll freeze the accounts, expose the fraud. Every person involved will be held accountable. Mallory nodded. But we'll need more than just financials. We need someone from the inside. Lila's eyes widened. What about Gavin? Mallory blinked. You think he knows something? He lived near us in Florida. He was always watching out for Mom. If she was afraid, she might have told him something. Bring him in, Alexander said. Quietly. That night, Gavin returned. He looked older, more tired, but when they showed him the clinic name and the doctor's photo, his face changed. I know him, he whispered. He used to come by late after hours, said he was a friend from her past. She never let me stay when he visited. Lila gripped his arm. Did you ever hear a name? Anything she said? Gavin paused. Then, slowly. She called him the Keeper. Said he wasn't just watching her. He was guarding a secret she never wanted you to find. The name, the Keeper, hung in the air like a ghost. It wasn't a title. It was a warning wrapped in mystery. Lila stared at Gavin, her voice low and urgent. Did she ever explain what that meant? Gavin shook his head slowly. Only once. She was shaking. Said, he kept the first copy. If he ever talks, they'll know it wasn't an accident. I thought she was having a panic attack. Alexander leaned in. The first copy of what? Gavin frowned. I don't know. She burned a stack of papers that night. Wouldn't let me near it. Told me to forget I ever saw anything. Mallory stood abruptly and headed to the command room. Moments later, she returned with an old photo she had pulled from the locker's contents, one of Claire and baby Lila in front of a rusted storage container. Look closely, she said, pointing. On the corner of the container was a spray-painted number 17B. That's not from Union Street Station, Mallory said. That's a different unit. Alexander studied it. Where? We're about to find out. Mallory's team cross-referenced every storage facility Claire had rented over the years. It took hours, but eventually they found it. Lock and Guard Storage, just outside Savannah, Georgia. Unit 17B was still listed under the name Annabelle Grayson. Rent had been paid through an anonymous fund for nearly 2 decades. The account had only stopped payments a few months after Claire's death. She didn't forget about it, Mallory said. She kept it hidden in case. Alexander stood. "We go tonight." Lila's voice was firm. "I'm going with you." They flew out under aliases, traveling light. Mallory coordinated security on the ground while Gavin stayed behind to monitor communications. Lochingar storage sat at the edge of a pine forest, weathered and quiet. Most units were empty or abandoned. The air smelled of damp earth and rust. They found 17B tucked in the far corner. The padlock was untouched, still bearing the old rusted initials, AG. Alexander cut it open. Inside, the unit was dark and musty. Dust danced in the light of their flashlights. Boxes lined the walls, all carefully labeled. One, in particular, was marked in Claire's unmistakable script, "Do not open unless she is safe." Lila stepped forward and lifted the lid. Inside was a stack of documents, old videotapes, and a sealed envelope with her name on it. Her hands trembled as she opened it. "My sweet Lila," the letter began, "if you're reading this, it means I couldn't outrun them. I never wanted you to carry my burdens, but I couldn't leave the truth to rot in silence." She flipped the page. Beneath it were court transcripts, a signed deposition, a sworn statement by Claire Monroe, detailing corruption, bribery, and a list of names, including Thaddeus Armitage, and shocking even Alexander, 2 active US senators. Mallory stared in disbelief. This isn't just personal anymore. This is national. But that wasn't the worst part. At the very bottom was one more note hastily written. "If this falls into the wrong hands, they won't stop at me. They'll come for her, for Lila, because she doesn't just carry my blood." Lila finished it aloud, her voice cracking. "She carries the last piece of the truth." They returned to the safe house in silence, the weight of the discovery pressing down like a thundercloud. The documents from the Savannah unit were now locked inside a vault within the compound. Mallory worked through the night, scanning and encrypting every page, every tape, every fragile whisper of Claire's courage. Lila sat alone in the library, the letter still in her hands. Her mother's words felt like a final embrace and a final burden. She carries the last piece of the truth. What did that mean? Why her? Alexander entered quietly and sat across from her. "There's something I haven't told you," he said. She looked up, weary. "Now's a good time." "When Claire left," he began slowly, "it wasn't just fear that drove her. I knew something else was going on, but she wouldn't say. My father had called her in for a meeting, alone. Afterward, she cut contact." Lila blinked. "What kind of meeting?" "I don't know, but a week later she vanished. And 3 days after that, my brother's boat exploded and he was presumed dead." She processed that, her mind racing. "So she saw your father, and then David disappeared?" Alexander nodded. "And now we've found that she was holding the biggest secret of all, testimony implicating powerful men, including my father. It all connects." Mallory entered just then, holding up a USB drive. I decrypted one of the tapes. They followed her into the command room, where she inserted the drive into the main console. The screen flickered, then filled with grainy footage. It was an old interview, time-stamped nearly 22 years ago. Claire sat on a worn couch, her hands shaking, her face pale. "I'm recording this in case I don't make it out," her voice said. "If this reaches my daughter, she needs to know the truth, not just about what I saw, but who I used to be." Lila leaned forward, eyes wide. "My real name is not Claire Monroe," Claire said. "It's Clara Jensen. I was a junior aide on the Senate Oversight Committee. I stumbled across documents connecting multiple senators, including Thaddeus Armitage, to illegal defense contracts and foreign money. When I tried to report it, I was threatened." Alexander stared at the screen in horror. "I fled, changed my name. And when I met Alexander, I thought, maybe I could start over, but his father recognized me. He warned me to disappear, or he'd make sure I did." Claire paused, tears in her eyes. "I found out I was pregnant. I couldn't risk her being used. So I ran. And I stayed gone." Lila's heart pounded. I know they'll find me someday, and if they do, my daughter will be in danger, because she's the only one with a direct genetic link to someone who could bring this scandal back to light. If anything happens to me, promise me this, Lila." The footage cut abruptly. Static. Mallory's voice was tight. "The rest of the tape is corrupted." Alexander looked at Lila, his voice raw. "You're not just her daughter. You're living evidence. A symbol of the truth they tried to erase." Tears streamed down Lila's cheeks. "They didn't just want her dead. They wanted me never to exist." Mallory's phone buzzed. She picked it up, then looked at them with dread in her eyes. "They know we have the files. Someone leaked it. News outlets are already being silenced. This is bigger than we thought." And far away, inside a high-rise office with government seals etched into its walls, a phone rang. A man answered, listened, then nodded. "Activate the protocol, find the girl, destroy everything she has." The compound descended into lockdown. Red lights pulsed through the halls, alarms silent but urgent. Mallory coordinated evacuation plans, while Alexander and Lila reviewed every document they had collected. The atmosphere was thick with urgency. The storm was no longer coming, it was here. "I don't understand," Lila said, pacing. "Why would my DNA matter? Why would I be the final threat?" Alexander turned from the table, his voice low and deliberate. "Because if what Claire said is true, if she gave testimony and swore statements under her real name, then you, as her biological heir, could reopen those investigations. You're the legal next of kin. Courts would have to consider it. You're not just a witness, Lila. You're a legal continuation of her." Mallory entered, slipping a small pouch into Lila's hands. "Flash drives. Duplicates, keep them on you at all times." Lila looked up, startled. "Are we leaving?" Mallory nodded. "We have to assume they'll attack the safe house next. We're splitting up. Decoys, air and ground routes. You're going with me." Alexander turned sharply. "No, she stays with me." Mallory met his eyes. "You're the visible target. Every move you make is being watched. She'll be safer with someone they're not expecting." Alexander's fists clenched. "They won't stop." "Then we don't stop either," Mallory said. Lila stepped between them. "If we scatter, what's the plan?" Mallory handed her a note. "There's a farmhouse in Vermont, burned-out old place. But it's safe. If anything happens, go there. Wait 3 days. Someone will come." Alexander took Lila's hand. "We'll find each other again. I swear it." Tears welled in her eyes, but she nodded. "Okay." As night fell, they moved. Lila and Mallory left in an unmarked van, slipping through side roads. Alexander's motorcade left in the opposite direction, a decoy, bright, loud, obvious. But David had already guessed the move. From the shadows of a roadside rest stop, he watched the van glide past. A smile tugged at his lips. "She thinks she's ahead," he murmured, pulling out a burner phone. "It's time." Back in the van, Mallory drove in silence, her eyes on the rearview mirror. Lila sat beside her, gripping the pouch of drives like a lifeline. "I should have known," she whispered. "All my life, I felt like something was missing, like I was born from a secret." Mallory nodded. "You weren't just born from it. You are it." They turned off the main road, heading toward a stretch of wooded land, when Mallory's phone buzzed again. She read the message, her face tightening. "They've breached the compound," she said. Lila's breath caught. "Alexander." "He's alive," Mallory said, "but surrounded." A beat of silence passed before she added, "We have to go dark. No phones, no signals, we're going off-grid." Lila nodded, her voice trembling but sure. "Then let's go." But 5 miles behind them, headlights flickered to life in the trees. And in the passenger seat of a pursuing SUV, David Armitage opened a small black case, inside a single syringe. "It ends tonight," he whispered, "whether she knows the last secret or not." The Vermont farmhouse rose like a phantom from the morning mist, charred beams, sagging roof, windows boarded and blackened. Yet beneath its ruin, it was fortified. Hidden below the kitchen was a trapdoor that led to a reinforced bunker built decades ago during the Cold War. No one but Mallory and a few trusted agents knew it existed. Lila stepped inside, heart racing. Her clothes were wrinkled, her hair damp from rain and sweat, and her fingers still clutched the pouch with the flash drives. Mallory closed the trapdoor above them and entered a code on a rusted keypad. The lights flickered on, dim, yellow, but functional. "We're safe. For now," Mallory said. The bunker was small but livable. 2 cots, bottled water, food rations, a radio, and a surveillance monitor connected to hidden cameras placed across the property. Lila sank onto one of the cots, her body too tired to tremble anymore. "Do you think he'll find us?" Mallory sat across from her. "He's already trying. But this place is off-grid. We've used it before." Lila pulled out one of the flash drives. "We have everything. The evidence, her testimony, even video." "Not everything," Mallory said. "David said there was one more secret. Something your mother never told anyone." Lila looked down. He was bluffing. Mallory's eyes didn't blink. He might not have been. They both sat in silence, the hum of the generator their only companion. Several hours passed. Lila dozed briefly, then awoke to static on the radio. Mallory was already at the console, trying to tune it. Then, through the static, came a faint voice. "Lila, this is Alexander." Lila sat upright. "Dad?" "Safe house breached. I'm safe. But they took the tapes. They're going to spin it all. Frame Claire as a fraud." Mallory leaned in. "Try to boost the signal. You have the real files. You need to get to Camden. That's where the judge lives, the one your mother trusted. He's the last person who can verify her identity. He'll testify for her. His name is..." The transmission cut. "Can we reconnect?" Lila asked. Mallory shook her head. "They jammed the signal, but we got enough. Camden, a judge." Lila's mind raced. "My mom mentioned that once. Said someone in Vermont knew the truth, that if she died, he'd help me." Mallory grabbed a map. "Camden's 30 miles southeast. Small town. We'll move at nightfall." Lila stood, determination rising. "Then we do it tonight." But miles away, David Armitage stood in a dark field, watching the farmhouse through binoculars. His men were scattered along the woods, armed and ready. He turned to Marcus Vane, the silent shadow who had always followed his orders. "We wait till they move. We let them feel safe. Then we finish it." And in his coat pocket, the syringe gleamed, filled with the same substance that had ended Claire's life. One final shot, meant for Lila. Night fell like a curtain over the Vermont hills, wrapping the landscape in heavy silence. The trees rustled in the breeze, their branches swaying like ghostly arms. Inside the bunker, Lila and Mallory packed quickly: maps, drives, encrypted phone, a handgun for protection. They moved at 2:07 a.m., slipping through the hidden back exit behind the farmhouse. The truck Mallory had stashed days earlier was still there, its matte black paint blending into the woods, no headlights, no sound. Lila climbed into the passenger seat, heart pounding in her chest. Mallory slid behind the wheel, checked her GPS one last time and started the silent engine. They drove south, cutting across dirt roads and forgotten backways, steering clear of major highways. Lila watched the trees, every flicker of shadow feeling like a threat. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. "If they ever find you, don't stop running, but don't forget why you're running either." After an hour, they entered the outskirts of Camden, a sleepy town that looked untouched by time. Old brick buildings, a white steeple church, a courthouse nestled beneath tall oaks. "This is it," Mallory said. "Judge Harlan Bishop, retired." But Claire trusted him. She listed his name once in a classified file. He helped her file her deposition anonymously 22 years ago. They pulled up to a small home near the courthouse. Lights were on inside. Mallory stepped out first, approaching cautiously. An older man opened the door, wearing glasses and a thick robe. His eyes narrowed at the sight of her, then widened when he saw Lila step into view. "You look just like her," he murmured. "I'm Lila," she said. "Claire's daughter." He nodded, stepping aside. "Get in, quickly." Inside, his home was cluttered but warm, Books, case files, old news clippings. He poured tea as they explained everything. When they handed him the flash drives, his hands trembled. "She told me one day this might happen," he said. "She made me swear I'd help if it did." "Will you testify?" Lila asked. "Will you confirm she was who she said she was?" He looked at her with tear-filled eyes. "I'll do more than that. I'll make sure every word she wrote is entered into the public record. I'll make noise loud enough that even Washington can't silence it." Relief swept over Lila, but it lasted only seconds. A sharp crack echoed outside, then another. Gunshots. Mallory yanked Lila down just as the window behind them shattered. Judge Bishop dove behind the couch, shouting, "Basement, now!" They sprinted down the narrow stairs as bullets slammed into the walls above. Mallory returned fire from behind the stairwell, buying them seconds. In the basement, Lila's eyes locked on an old coal chute, the only exit. She crawled through first, then pulled the others behind her. They emerged into a cold alley. Mallory grabbed her arm. "They're here. We've got to split." "I'm not leaving without him," Lila said. Mallory pointed to a rusted bike. "Ride east, cross the river, I'll draw them." Lila hesitated only a moment, then mounted the bike and pedaled into the darkness. Behind her, the house burst into flame, and in the shadows, David watched, smiling because she was heading straight toward the place he had prepared. Lila's legs burned as she pushed the bike through the misty dawn. The narrow road twisted through pine and fog, each turn carrying the taste of danger. Her mind raced with questions. Was Mallory safe? Had the judge survived? How far behind was David? But there was no time for answers. Only instinct. Only the mission. At sunrise, she reached the covered bridge that crossed the Andon River. The wooden boards creaked beneath her tires. Below, the water rushed in icy silence. Halfway across, she paused to breathe. Then she heard it. A second set of wheels. A quiet engine. Coming closer. She looked back. Nothing visible yet, but she felt him. David. Lila kicked off again, racing across the bridge. On the far side, the forest thickened. The path forked. She veered left, deeper into the woods, heart hammering, lungs screaming. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew she couldn't stop. She crashed through brush and briar until she stumbled into a clearing. An old logging cabin, half-rotted, still standing. She ducked inside, breath catching in clouds. Footsteps followed moments later. Calm. Deliberate. David's voice called out like an echo through the trees. "Lila, I'm not here to hurt you." She stayed silent. "You've made it this far. I have to give you credit," he continued, stepping into the clearing. "But this isn't your story to finish. It never was." She crept toward the back door of the cabin, gripping a rusted poker she'd found near the fireplace. Her mother's face flashed in her mind. Claire had run, hidden, but she hadn't given up. Lila wouldn't either. David stepped into the doorway now, eyes sweeping the dim interior. "You have something that doesn't belong to you," he said softly. "Give it to me, and I'll let you walk away." Lila stood, poker raised. "She wasn't yours to erase." He smiled faintly. "Your mother betrayed powerful men. She signed her fate. You don't have to." "She told the truth," Lila said, voice shaking. "And now so will I." David's smile disappeared. He reached into his coat and pulled out the syringe. This was meant for her, a quiet exit. She earned that much, but you keep making noise. Lila's hands trembled. "You poisoned her." "She left me no choice." He stepped forward, but before he could close the distance, a shot rang out. David's shoulder exploded in blood as he stumbled backward. Mallory stepped from the trees, gun raised, eyes locked on the target. "Step, away." David clutched his arm, breathing heavy, laughing even as pain twisted his face. "You're too late." Suddenly, a low beeping echoed from his jacket. Mallory's eyes widened. "Lila, run!" But Lila froze as David ripped something from his pocket, a small black device blinking red. "I may not leave here," he growled, "but neither will she." He hurled it toward the floor. Lila dove down and the cabin burst into fire. The explosion rocked the forest, sending a shockwave through the trees. Flames swallowed the rotting wood of the cabin in seconds, smoke curling into the dawn sky like the last scream of a dying monster. Shards of timber rained down, embers dancing across the grass. Mallory staggered back, coughing, ears ringing from the blast. "Lila!" she screamed, running toward the inferno. No answer. She circled the ruins, dodging falling beams, her eyes frantic, until she saw it. Near the back of the cabin, part of the floor had collapsed into an old root cellar, protected by stone and soil. Mallory dove toward it, clearing debris, her fingers blistering from heat. Then a voice, weak, rasping. "Mallory." She ripped the rest of the boards free and found Lila, curled in the shallow pit, covered in ash, bruised but alive. Mallory reached in, pulled her up, and held her close. "You're okay. You're okay." Lila gasped, her throat raw. "David." "Gone," Mallory said. "The device, it was real, but he didn't survive the blast." Lila sat up slowly, face streaked with soot and tears. "Is it over?" Mallory looked away. "No. It's just starting." By midday, they returned to Camden. The courthouse was sealed off, the judge in hiding. But his statement had already been recorded and sent to the media via secure upload, and Lila's copy of the evidence, the final flash drive, was now in the hands of 3 independent news outlets. That evening, the first headline broke. "Exclusive. Leaked documents tie billionaire legacy to government corruption and federal witness cover-up." The story exploded across every platform. Political figures denied involvement. Armitage Foundation donors pulled funding. Protests erupted outside courthouses and government buildings. And through it all, one name rose again and again: Claire Monroe. Not as a fraud, not as a runaway, but as a whistleblower, a mother, a martyr. In Alexander's high-rise office, the news played across 10 screens. He sat in silence, watching the empire his father built slowly collapse under the truth his daughter helped release. Lila entered quietly behind him. He turned, and for the first time since they met, his face was full of peace. "You did it," he said. "We did," she corrected. They stood together at the window, watching the city churn with change. "Claire would be proud," he said softly. "I wish she could see it," Lila replied. "She does," he said. "In you." Mallory stepped in, holding a small envelope. "This came today," she said, "from the Department of Justice." Lila opened it carefully. Inside was a letter, an offer to testify, to speak before Congress, to tell her mother's story. She looked up at Alexander, her eyes wide with something between fear and purpose. "Will you come with me?" He nodded. Every step of the way. And far beneath the headlines and courtrooms, deep in the heart of everything Claire fought for, the truth had finally found its voice. Her daughter, her legacy, her light in the dark. 2 months later, the Capitol was silent as Lila Monroe stepped up to the microphone. Cameras flashed from every direction. Senators, journalists, and citizens leaned forward, waiting to hear the voice of the girl who had survived everything and carried a nation's secret in her blood. She stood tall. Her posture was steady, but in her heart she could feel her mother beside her. "My name is Lila Monroe," she began, her voice ringing clear through the chamber. "My mother was Claire Monroe, born Clara Jensen. She was a federal whistleblower, a witness in one of the largest corruption cases our country never got to see." She paused, hands resting lightly on the podium. She gave everything to protect the truth, and when she couldn't speak for herself, she left her voice in me. Gasps echoed as the first video played, the footage from Claire's deposition. The room froze. Words from a woman long silenced now rang across history. Mallory sat nearby, her eyes never leaving Lila. Alexander, in the front row, had tears in his eyes. Gavin, recovered and quietly proud, watched from behind security glass. The hearing stretched for hours. Lila recounted everything: her mother's life, the escape, the poisoning, the cover-ups, David's crimes, and the documents Claire risked everything to hide. She didn't cry, not once, because this was her justice. When it ended, The room rose in standing ovation, not political, not orchestrated, real. Weeks later, formal indictments began. Foundations collapsed. Names once protected by wealth were dragged into light. Statues fell, policies changed, and Claire Monroe's name was cleared. One early morning, Lila returned to her mother's grave with Alexander beside her. She knelt, laying a single sunflower at the base of the headstone. "You were right, Mom," she whispered. "The truth did survive." She placed the medal awarded to her posthumously by the Senate, one of courage and federal honor, atop the stone. Alexander placed a hand on her shoulder. "What now?" Lila smiled softly. "Now, I live." Months passed. Lila moved into a quiet brownstone in the city. She enrolled in law school, gave interviews when it mattered, and every year on her mother's birthday she lit a candle, not in mourning, but in triumph. One day, while organizing old letters, she found a tiny sealed envelope at the bottom of her mother's final journal. It had her name on it. Inside was a note. "If you're reading this, it means you made it, my brave girl. I hope you found him, your father. I hope he looked into your eyes and saw the good I always knew lived there. You are not the pain I carried. You are the proof that truth survives, that love wins, that no matter what they tried to erase, they couldn't take you." Lila held the letter to her chest, eyes full, because she had been hunted, betrayed, broken, but she had risen, not as a shadow of her mother, but as her own name, Lila Monroe, daughter of Claire, and the girl who could not be silenced.